Google was almost named after the biggest number most humans will never even bother counting. But thanks to one tiny spelling mistake, it became one of the most recognizable words on planet Earth. And the crazy part is, if one Stanford student had typed one extra letter correctly in 1997, billions of people today might be saying, just Google it. Yes, seriously. Before Google became the digital god we now pray to whenever we forget anything, it had one of the ugliest names in tech history. BackRub. Not kidding. That was the original name, because founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin built the search engine to analyze backlinks between websites. So in their minds, backlinks, BackRub, genius. In everyone else's mind, that sounded less like a billion-dollar company and more like a suspicious massage parlor behind a gas station. They knew the name had to go, because nobody was going to trust the future of the internet to something that sounded like it charges by the hour. So one day, in 1997, Larry and a few Stanford brainiacs locked themselves in a room trying to come up with a new name. Not just any name, a name big enough to match what they were trying to do. And what they were trying to do was borderline insane. Organize basically all the information on the internet. Now imagine naming a machine built to swallow the entire web. You need something massive, something mathematical, something that screams, this thing is going to process more data than your brain can comprehend. That's when one of the students suggested the word Googol. A Googol is the number one followed by 100 zeros. An absurdly gigantic number chosen specifically because it represented near infinite scale. Exactly the vibe Larry wanted. This was the perfect nerd name. Huge, smart, memorable. And then, someone fumbled the keyboard. When they checked if the domain name was available, Stanford student Sean Anderson typed google.com instead of google.com. One accidental typo, one missing letter, one microscopic brain glitch. And internet history changed forever. Now here's where it gets wild. Most people would correct the mistake. Larry Page looked at it and basically said, wait, that actually looks better. Because Google looked too technical, too math textbook, too much like homework. But Google, shorter, cleaner, easier to pronounce, easier to remember. So instead of fixing the typo, they bought the typo. On September 15th, 1997, Google.com was officially registered, and a spelling accident quietly became one of the most valuable brand names in human history. Think about how insane that is. One wrong keystroke. That is all it took. No expensive branding agency, no million-dollar naming consultant, no corporate brainstorming retreat with people eating croissants and saying words like synergy. Just two sleep-deprived Stanford students, a whiteboard, and somebody who couldn't spell under pressure. And somehow that typo is now worth trillions. Today, Google is so powerful the name stopped being a company name and became a verb. People don't even say search for it anymore. They say Google it. That typo literally entered everyday language, which is something most billion-dollar brands spend decades trying and failing to do. So the reason Google is called Google because the founders wanted a name based on Googol, the giant mathematical number that symbolized endless information. But a misspelled domain search looked cooler than the correct version, and instead of correcting the error, they accidentally branded the internet forever. In other words, the company that became the smartest thing online was named because somebody couldn't type.